Hello and welcome to As the World Burns. I'm joined here with my co-host D. I'll be your host of this
Hey,
evening. And
oh,
might I say, we have a fantastic episode today. We're going to be talking about Bob Lazar, the United States government working with aliens, the possible history of the interaction between aliens and the human race, Mars colonies, and potentially the moon. What did the Nazis actually do in Antarctica? And what does all this have to do with John Lear, Bob Lazar, and also the connection between Project Stargate and Project Pegasus and what's currently going on in our world potentially? A lot of that we're going to be talking about remote viewing, which we kind of touched on in an earlier episode. We're going to be touching on pretty much a lot of subjects that we've touched on already, but just going to condense it down and kind of connect it all. According to a lot of different religions and scriptures from around the world, there's been a story of a great flood and a cataclysm that's wiped out ancient societies and potentially even due to a deity's wrath. Now, there is a story about a race of aliens called the Annunaki who supposedly came to our planet to harvest resources like gold and other heavy metals, help their own society, but also stave off a potential destruction on their home planet. The Anunnaki came to Earth to find the resources. Apparently, this planet that they came from was called Nibiru. They found a planet that they were able to take this other race of aliens that we all know as the Greys, but apparently they were called the Gigi to the ancient Sumerians. Now, the Gigi were not good enough slaves for the Anunnaki, so what they decided to do was they found an ancient race of early hominids that they decided to genetically engineer into being their own tools to build and gain and pillage the resources from our society and just give it to them. I guess we weren't even really a society, but just our planet. So what ended up happening is the whole Anunnaki situation kind of went relatively smooth. And from what I heard, there's something called the Galactic Federation also in outer space that's run by a race of mantis creatures, which kind of sounds like Rick and Morty, but apparently this is a conspiracy going back to the 80s or 70s or something like that. There's a race of mantis creatures that supposedly run everything, and they're a part of something called the Galactic Federation. I guess there was a prime minister from a certain country that actually or not prime minister, but maybe a defense, one of the heads of the defense of another country, said that there is a galactic federation and that we are at the will of this galactic federation. So essentially, the Anunnaki kind of start a war, or maybe another alien race called the Nords start a war with them. And what ends up happening is the Nords and the Anunnaki end up committing like firefights and space fights and all this kind of crazy shit. Apparently, there was a
now,
battle.
can I
Yep,
just say the
yep.
Nords, right? Those are the ones that the Nazis like, right?
Uh, that's I haven't gotten too into that part of all that yet,
They like see
and reading
themselves,
about it.
they're like, yeah, that's us. We're like that.
Well, I mean, I guess they like the idea of like what the Nords were in human terms. Like they liked blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, so I guess they liked the aliens that
Okay.
kind of looked like that.
They wish they were 8 foot tall Nordic humanoid aliens. They
Yes,
wish.
they do wish they were 8 foot tall, freakish and weird humanoid aliens. Anyways, supposedly the Anunnaki and the Nords ended up committing wars and ended up committing battles and attacking each other. And there was apparently a battle that you can look up that happened in 1561 over Nuremberg, which was, if you look it up, it's crazy. Shows like triangles and circles. Like there's a picture from back in the day, like shooting what looks like lasers and light beams at each other, and just all kinds of crazy shit just going on. And there's black triangles in the sky. It kind of just makes you think. Anyways, supposedly this was actually a battle that took place on Earth. The Gigi are then left to secure the planet after the Nords kind of kick out the Anunnaki a little bit, or at least put them a little bit more into hiding. And maybe they didn't put them into hiding, but at least the battle didn't rage on as much. It kind of died down over the years. So what ends up happening is supposedly the U.S. government made a deal in return for utilizing some of the technology with what were left over, the Greys, the Gigi. And they ended up calling in representatives to the Anunnaki to basically come and speak with our generals and the president at the time in order to create a deal. I think it was Eisenhower at the time. But that's getting ahead of myself. So, reverse time a little bit. Supposedly the Nazis were working on alien tech or knew something about alien technology. I don't know. I didn't get too deep into all this. There's something called the Die Glock, which was, you might know it as the bell. It was this giant bell-shaped UFO, supposedly, that they had created. I'm not really trying to talk about that. What I'm trying to talk about is back when we were talking about Antarctica. So, allegedly, the Nazis set up a base in Antarctica where they found a hollow Earth that had like a tropical paradise where they were able to basically lay a fort down in the event that that anything were to happen, I guess, to the Third Reich. It was like Odessa is what they call it, where when the Third Reich ended up disbanding and trying to form a Fourth Reich in, say, Antarctica. Not in, say, Argentina. Argentina was one of the places, all over South America specifically. There were a lot of Nazis just getting dropped off. And speaking of which, a lot of these same Nazis ended up getting dropped off in the United States and in Russia. I think Britain might have been a part of that deal, but I think specifically most of the Nazi scientists went to the United States and went to Russia. There's even a rumor that Joseph Mengele was still alive and that he was doing experiments, I think, in Dulce base on people, genetic engineering, like these weird creatures, and experimenting with human and animal DNA. But that's a story for another day. Anyways, supposedly the United States got wind of the Nazis being in Antarctica, so what they did was they did something called Operation High Jump, where they flew down to Antarctica and the United States invaded this secret Nazi base or whatever and took it over and basically set up shop in Antarctica and found the connection between the aliens and the supposedly the Nazis. And this gets into a crazy territory. Some people say that there's colonies on Mars and the moon that are Nazi bases because they were in contact with the Greys first, which supposedly I didn't hear that they were in contact with the Nords. I've heard they were in contact with the Greys, and they had Anunnaki technology and were more so in connection with the Anunnaki at the time.
I would really love it if the Greys were working with the Nazis instead of the Nords, and the Nords are just like, those Nazis are fun. I guess I wouldn't love if the Greys were working with the Nazis. I shouldn't start that. I would not love that. But just not the Nords would be awesome.
So here's why I'm saying that the Anunnaki and the Greys were probably working with the Nazis, because supposedly the Anunnaki had a colony on Mars. Now, let's fast forward a little bit, just randomly. There was a remote viewing program that we talked about. I think it was on the last episode that's going to be coming out before this, and we talk about UFOs and remote viewing. And there was a Project Stargate. There was a program where they were basically seeing Mars, and a guy talks about seeing Mars when it was going through a cataclysm. He says that it was about, say, 1,000,000 years ago or something like that. But I think this story correlates to everything going on with the ancient Sumerian texts and the Anunnaki and all of this other stuff. And this happened all, and other people, like I think it was John Lear and some other people have basically said that they believe this happened about 10,000 years ago. There was a major cataclysm where the and who knows, that this major cataclysm that I'm talking about could have actually just been the last major cataclysm of Earth, and that could have been just a
10,000
great
years just
flood.
isn't like far back enough for like.
Well, well, that's what I'm saying, is that could have just been the last great flood that recreated society, and we could have been going through recreations of society, going back generations of humanity, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's somebody even mentioned that we could be going back about 200,000 years for humanity as a whole. And I think that
Yeah.
would make sense, going back to like the very moment that they genetically engineered us. And speaking of genetically engineering, Bob Lazar once said in an interview that the human race has been genetically engineered 65 times.
Who
Anyways,
said that?
Bob Lazar said that in an interview.
Wait, what? This is what I was talking about. I need some stuff like this where it's like, who the fuck told him that? 65?
This is all connected. So, I mean, Bob Lazar is more of the minute detail, and I want to get into that more so later on, but I want to run through this and then we'll talk about like all those details. So basically, one thing I forgot to mention too is that when in Antarctica, the Nazis were going to Antarctica, there were actually a few U-boats that actually failed to make it there. And I think they were actually destroyed by the Americans, but this was before, when the war was still going on. Well, lo and behold, the Americans actually found these U-boats, and one of them, the only cargo on board, was actually an incredibly crazy amount of mercury. Now, supposedly, mercury is a way, or mercury is used to create an electromagnetic effect that can create anti-gravitic properties. Something to keep in mind with all this. And after the Americans found the Nazi base and sieged it and took it from the Nazis, what ended up happening is supposedly there was supposedly there was an organization found that a lot of people may know. It's called Majestic 12. And a lot of people think it was a myth, and a lot of people don't think it actually was real. But supposedly it was these 12 mostly Navy guys who were involved in the operations and day-to-day of crafts and alien technology and alien communication, basically. So, Majestic 12 supposedly gets formed 1947. You know what else happens in 1947? There's a famous crash in the desert in a small town outside of a small town called Roswell in New Mexico. And what ends up happening is supposedly they were running a nuclear test in New Mexico, and this flying saucer just so happened to be watching the nuclear test from a distance. And miraculously, the story goes, this flying saucer got hit with lightning. Supposedly, this is how the Roswell UFO crashed. like something out of a biblical story or an ancient text. A bolt of lightning hit this alien spacecraft and forever changed the way that we day to day operate our lives and completely altered our reality forever. So, anyways, that's all allegedly.
Wait. Where was
All
this
allegedly.
ship?
This was
Where
Roswell, New
was that?
Mexico.
Oh, so allegedly it was a lightning bolt that struck the.
Allegedly, it was a lightning bolt that struck the spacecraft that fell out of the sky in Roswell. And allegedly, it was
Okay.
while a nuclear test was happening. So they brought this flying saucer to the famous Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where they dismantled it, and supposedly they had 12 companies, or sorry, no, 10 companies, if I'm not mistaken, come in and look at this saucer. If I'm not mistaken, among the companies was would eventually become Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Boeing, surprisingly enough. Amongst the noise, Boeing managed to get their hands on some alien technology. Anyways, they stripped it, and for the most part, a lot of these scientists and a lot of these groups and skunk works and all these guys, they shipped it back to Groom Lake, Nevada. And what Groom Lake is it became Area 51 in 1955. If I'm not mistaken, it took them a few years to build, but Groom Lake in 1955 was officially established as Area 51. Maybe not established as that. It was actually called S4, according to Bob Lazar. That's what the operating site for Area 51 that he worked on was called. But I would imagine that would be just Sector 4.
Oh.
Area 51 is established, and future employee Bob Lazar is looking real bright. He's going to high school. He's not doing too good, but he's taking chemistry. He's potentially making friends with hookers and stuff like that. You know, typical things that these kids do. Eventually, he would go on to work at Area 51 and reverse engineer spacecrafts. But again, that's ahead of the story. Allegedly, in 1955, Dwight D. Eisenhower wanted to know what was going on at Area 51. So what he did was he called a meeting to basically either have them tell the CIA, if I'm not mistaken, tell him what's going on, or he would have it raided or something like that. The gist is that the operators of Area 51 basically gave him a nice pat on the back, showed him an alien diplomat or a couple of alien diplomats that basically told him that you don't really need to know what's going on, but rest assured we're working on big things. So Eisenhower ends up not really complaining much, but ends up giving a farewell speech that rails against the military-industrial complex, and supposedly that was about the very nature of what was happening in Area 51, according to legend. Here's where we get a little crazy. Back in the early 1900s, there was a famous scientist by the name of Nikola Tesla. Now, when Nikola Tesla was alive, purportedly he spoke to aliens or was getting radio signals from outer space. This is something that I guess he described in his journal, but he also made a bunch of schematics on energy weapons. Supposedly he made a schematic on a death ray, an early version of a death ray. A lot of insane things with Nikola Tesla. If you look into his life, it was fascinating. If I'm not mistaken, I did a report about Nikola Tesla in high school. But very fascinating guy, and his rivalry with Thomas Edison was interesting. Well, not really. It was more of Westinghouse that had the rivalry with Thomas Edison, if I'm not mistaken. But if you look into that whole situation, it's very fascinating. Anyways, Nikola Tesla died, and what the FBI did was they wanted to bring in a specialist to look at Nikola Tesla's equipment. So they hired this guy from MIT named John G. Trump. Now, you may recognize this name because John G. Trump is actually the brother of Frederick Trump, Donald Trump, our current president's father. So, John G. Trump, and you can look this up, this is very, very, very true, was an MIT professor who was asked to come in and retrieve and look at the documents that Nikola Tesla wrote and created and look at all the creations and patents and things that he had and ideas he had. Later on, John Trump ended up, I think it was revolutionizing something in X-rays. I wonder where he got that idea for that technology. Anyways, he was supposedly a genius in electromagnetics also, and ended up engineering a lot of stuff later on in life. Fascinating character, John Trump. Another guy that you might want to look into. If you want to look into something, John Trump and his relation to Nikola Tesla is a fascinating story. But here's where it gets crazy. Supposedly, Nikola Tesla was in contact with aliens. Supposedly, they took all this equipment and they brought it in to Area 51 and they tested out these lasers and all this just nutty technology. Well, one of the things that the gray aliens supposedly introduced to the United States government, allegedly, they created something called a chronovisor. Now, if you've ever heard of a chronovisor, supposedly this is basically like a VR device designed to take you basically back in time or forward in time. Basically designed to show you like a VR helmet some moment in time. I'm trying to think of what a connection in pop culture to this that would be. Maybe the Assassin's Creed chair, maybe. Whatever that's called. I forgot what that was called. But potentially that would be like a good comparison. You're basically taken backwards or forwards in time. I don't think that you are taken to an ancestor. I think you're just able to see the future. Much like just Google Street View, but Google Future View. So there were these group of people. One of them was named Regina Dugan, or Duggan. This is all allegedly also. I would like to also say that. So there was this other guy named Basiago. Andy Basiago. Now, Andy Basiago was a Seattle attorney who supposedly came out in I think it was the 90s or 2000s, and claimed that he was a part of a secret CIA program called Project Pegasus. Now, if anyone is familiar, Andrew Basiago basically described that he was in a group with this woman named Regina Dugan and a man named Barry Soetoro, who would later on change his name to something else that people might be familiar with, allegedly. Allegedly, this is who this person is. But we'll get into that in a moment. So, Andy Basiago ran for president in 2016. A very interesting guy.
Whoa.
Andrew Basiago, Seattle attorney, Bernard Mendez, Brett Stillings, and a man you know currently as Barry Soetoro were all part of this elite squad in the CIA, supposedly, called the Jump Room, under an elite thing called Project Pegasus. Andrew Basiago claims that he has been to the moon and Mars, and that we have actually faked the moon landings, and the reason why we faked the moon landings is, or I'm sorry, he actually says that we faked the moon landings because there's actually colonies on the moon and Mars, and there's actually been colonies for years, and that supposedly they don't want you to know about that, and that's why they fake all these pictures and fake all these things with the rovers. But even Barry might even, Andrew might even be a disinformation agent because he claims that the Mars rover is real and that you can see signs of life in the Mars rover picture. Which is that to me is one of the only things that I think is suspect about this entire thing, because I'm pretty convinced now that the Mars rover is not real. But I think that that's funny that that's the one thing in this whole story that I find suspect. Anyways, so Andrew Basiago claims that you can actually see him as a child in a Gettysburg photograph. And the reason why is because all these people that were in this group, Andrew Basiago, Bernard Mendez, Brett Stillings, Barry Soetoro, and Regina Dugan, were all children at the time that they were doing this. And the reason why, supposedly, is because the technology to send them backwards and forwards in time, and yes, you could send them forwards in time, supposedly, the technology was made for something a little bit smaller than them. And if a human tried to actually step on, an adult human tried to step on the pad, supposedly it wouldn't work too well and they would break it. So supposedly they had a team of kids. They also said that the kids were something called terra pulsa, if I'm not mistaken, which essentially is a Latin phrase for blank slate. And it's the idea that children will present unique and interesting perspectives because of the fact that they have no natural I like no feel like no manufactured view of the world yet, no bias basically.
They have no preconceived notions.
Yeah, exactly. That was a great way to put that. All these guys supposedly traveled backwards and forwards in time. Regina Dugan, I'm sure, traveled a lot forward in time because Regina Dugan, you might recognize her. She actually was involved in the founding of Google. If I'm not mistaken, she was also involved in the founding of Facebook. She was head of DARPA for quite a few years. I think she served 2 terms in DARPA as head of DARPA. And actually, somebody very familiar to this story, who Andy Basiago claims that. So Andy claims that he's something called a planetary whistleblower, and he claims that all these people that looked into the future and into the past all used it basically to kind of get ahead a little bit. And supposedly Barry Soetoro actually changed his name to Barack Obama. So Barry Soetoro claims that Barack Obama, our past president, was actually a time traveler working for the CIA in Operation Pegasus under the Jump Room moniker, and he was one of the first time travelers in history. Now, a lot of people claim that that's actually the reason why Donald Trump has a lot of issues with Barack Obama, because Trump actually knows that his uncle helped give the CIA the technology that would actually give Obama the presidency, because of Barack Obama. Supposedly, all the CIA and Barack Obama and all these guys went to the future, saw that Obama was president, and groomed him to become president since like the 60s or the 70s or something like that. So supposedly it was like they were trying to make a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now a lot of people think that that made Donald Trump angry, that they used his technology that his uncle had found, and that the aliens helped help give to the
Hey, my
government.
uncle stole that idea. That's mine.
That's rightfully mine. I should be president now, too. A lot of people think that's also why the CIA was against Trump in 2016, but the FBI was actually sort of supporting Trump because the CIA secretly was in factions with Obama and was supporting the fact that Obama was a time traveler, I guess. That's another like whole conspiracy theory thing that happened. But supposedly Barack Obama, our past president, may have been one of the first time travelers in the human race. Something to think about. But anyways,
This is the type of shit I want to happen. I hope this is true because these are the great people that are moving society that we never really know about. And it's almost like he came around. They're like, "Don't worry, we're gonna make you president, so people still know you forever."
well, exactly that's why I wanted. That's why I got so deep into this whole thing because I saw so many crazy connections that just like it's wild the amount that you like can get out of this like I didn't realize the Anunnaki and the government thing like kind of sat so deeply in everything. And like once you get down into it, like this really is like a very wide-ranging like conspiracy. And the only reason I got into all this, I mean, I got into a lot of different aspects of this. I was starting to piece together all these different things from things that Bob Lazaro was saying, things that I've read in other things. It's crazy. That brings us to our next person.
Oh, can I actually say something else?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I was actually talking about this last time we had a similar conversation, and I was like, I was the one ranting about it. Diana Pasolka, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that I think that the guy she was talking to might be one of these guys that we're talking
Andy Basiago.
about. No, maybe he goes by a different name now, but I think the guy that she was talking to and hanging out with might be one of these secret time travelers.
So, what I was also thinking, and I forgot to mention this and write this down, but Andrew Basiago also mentioned that the CIA and the military had teleportation, and I thought that all this related to the Philadelphia Project. And he said back in like the 90s or something like that. And I thought this was very interesting, but he said back in like the 90s or the early 2000s that the CIA did have teleportation capabilities, but it would only be relegated to the military and it would be available in about 40 years, he said. And that was either the 90s or the early 2000s. And I saw something the other day.
40?
He said about 40 years. And I saw something the other day that basically said that in like 5 years that we were going to have teleportation in the military. And I was like, what the fuck? I read that actually before I read that whole like Andy Basiago thing. So when I read that afterwards, I was like, holy shit, maybe this guy's actually on to something, or maybe this guy was involved in it. Maybe Obama was a time traveler, which would be the coolest fucking thing ever. Honestly, if I found out Obama was a time traveler, I'd probably like him a little bit more. Honestly,
Yeah, I would like him a whole lot.
this is when Bob Lazar came onto the scene. He befriended also a guy named John Lear. Bob Lazar, for those who don't know, this is actually why we started this whole episode, because we wanted to talk about Bob Lazar originally. And Bob Lazar is a fascinating character. He claims to have worked in a place, as mentioned before, S4. It's supposedly, I guess, a subsector of what people call Area 51 or Groom Lake. And apparently he helped reverse engineer spacecrafts while he was there. Excuse me. He, what else? He claimed to have, I think, seen an alien body once, but everything was so compartmentalized that he mostly got to deal with the actual spacecraft. That he mostly got to deal with the actual spacecraft. Uh, the one thing that I really got a lot out of the Bob Lazar thing, though, was Element 115, Moscovium, as it was actually discovered years later, if I'm not mistaken, in 2003 in Russia. And supposedly Moscovium, or Element 115, is one of the hardest substances in existence. Like, it's almost impossible to synthesize. And Bob Lazar claimed that it had some kind of crazy electromagnetic properties that, like, basically defied the laws of gravity as we know it. Part of this whole thing is that Bob Lazar would say, like, the ships had like a psychic connection where you could kind of feed into whatever you wanted with the ship. A lot of what he said too was that the military tried to replicate the substance, but they would supposedly make like a dirty version of it, or like a shitty version of Element 115, and it never actually like worked out to be like the really good version. What I think the reason why that is because, I mean, I would assume this also, you might be interested in this, but supposedly if alchemy's real, I think alchemy might have been at one point just some kind of machine that aliens gave to humans or used with humans that allowed that had the that basically shot protons or was able to transform metals by changing the protons in metal structure. So I think that's one thing that the aliens have never shown us. They've probably shown us some crazy shit, but they probably haven't shown us, a real way to synthesize Moscovium. Because if they did that, we would potentially be all powerful. If we're able to completely conquer space flight that quickly, I think that it would lead to a lot of issues. But anyways, Bob Lazar supposedly worked with this Element 115 Moscovium. Later on, he was actually selling chemicals online, if I'm not mistaken, and he, I guess, was being investigated because of somebody like used the chemicals to poison somebody else or something like that. So they raided his place, but supposedly he said what they were looking for was the last bit of Element 115 that he had left, that he took from the lab.
Real stuff?
The real stuff. He had a cheating wife.
What's he doing with the element? Why isn't he doing anything?
Well, I think he just took it as a way to have a what would you call that? Have some cards, actually, or what
Want
would
you
the
to
word
figure it
be?
out?
Well, no, I think he wanted like a to always have like a seat at the table, so we always wanted to have something on them.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
No,
having the
absolutely.
actual
Like,
Element
you're a
115
sci-
was.
I know. I'm just saying that if you're a scientist and you have this element and you know what it's for and you know what it can do, and you're literally one of the scientists who's like paid to work on it, why wouldn't
Yeah,
you be investing in yourself while you have it in your hands
I
as a
mean, he
car?
probably, well, he probably did study it, but the idea, I think, is too, even he said that it was like almost impossible to like mold. You needed like a power that like was unmatched. And what I think that power is, like I was saying earlier, I think that's the power of like a neutrino star. I think that somehow these aliens harvested like were able to like create some kind of like neutrino gun or something like that, for lack of a better way to put it, and were able to create basically like an alchemy machine with a gun.
Well,
I don't know. Yeah, because the idea
you
that
know,
if you could add protons to like metals and do all this, is that you could essentially make alchemy happen. You could change metals into other metals. You could, you know, change iron to gold. But what's up?
You know how we were talking about the time travelers again? I'm sorry, I'm stuck on the time travelers.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It was a fascinating thing.
Yeah. No one's ever told me that Barack Obama was a time traveler. What I was going to say is that have you heard of the Montauk Project?
Yeah, of course. And the Montauk Monster?
Yeah, apparently they do a lot of stuff like this too. But I was actually just listening to another podcast explain this, and at one point they reference how, was it during the Montauk Project one, or was it another episode? They reference how John Keel believed that to like contact aliens over a long distance, right? It would the only medium you could realistically use to contact, and I think it was more so like referring to aliens talking to humans. Like if aliens wanted to talk to us from a long distance from wherever they are, the only way for them to realistically do that is through like psychic abilities, or is like psychically, or like telepathically or psionically, however you want to word it, because of quantum entanglement, and how like the only thing that like it it just made sense to me, because it also makes me think about time travelers and how like what if like a chronovisor is really just people, like how we're talking about the men who stare at goats, and like saying that they see shit like at these coordinates, and they're like, oh, actually I see something from millions of years ago. It's all like that is the chronovisor, and time travel
Well,
could even be an extension of that.
they were saying that remote viewing and the chronovisor were different, but maybe what I think you're saying is that the chronovisor is basically like an evolved version of remote viewing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like you're
Also, I think
able
that
to tap.
maybe
Yep.
a lot of the secret, a lot of like the hidden like aspect of what we're doing is really just that it is us. Like, what if the secret to time travel is just you have to go back in your mind.
So let me tell you something about the chronovisor and also about the whole time travel thing that they said. Now, they said when they went back in time, things were like Basiago actually said that he went to Ford's Theater on the night Lincoln got shot. And he said that he actually saw himself sitting in the crowd watching Lincoln get shot at one point. Like he saw multiple versions of himself.
Like he went back to go watch it again.
Well, so that suggests that there's one timeline, right? But then he also suggests that when you go into the future, that things aren't necessarily set in stone. That what happens is like he's gone to the future and things have been different. Like he went to the future, he said, and the capital was underwater in a literal swamp in Stillwater. Like the world basically ended and it was just done. Like like some kind of cataclysm happened, and at that point the capital was underwater and there was nobody around. It was just dead. So
Scary.
yeah, I always thought that part of the story was kind of nuts, and that also suggests that all the people that were like Regina Dugan or Duggan or whatever her name was, and all these people, he saw probably the projects that were going to happen, and she just took advantage of like the different ones like Google and Facebook. Like she as soon as she got word of what they were going to be, she dropped her hat in the ring and was like, all right. Or she already knew that she was going to be involved in this, like Barack Obama knew he was going to be president, and she just, sought out these things like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm sure a lot of this too ends up being paradoxes, but or like a way to like stop paradoxes, I mean. But what I was also thinking about is, could these guys time traveling, and the amount of times that they've supposedly time traveled is a lot, but could these guys supposedly uh what's the word, have caused the Mandela effect? And maybe the idea that the CIA has ramped up all this time travel causes the Mandela effect.
This is what I was talking to you about, explaining that. I wasn't even talking about Obama and the guys you're mentioning. I was talking about Peter Thiel. I was talking about Elon Musk. Talking about if they had some control over some sort of time travel, and they're the ones who are putting Donald Trump in power. But also the idea that based around time travel, and this is more about the idea of there being a physical time travel machine that they need. The idea that you can only travel in time starting from when that machine exists. Right. I know.
I don't
But
think that's
I'm just saying that the
how it
Mandela
works,
effect thing.
because
No, I know. I was just telling
they're
you the
able to
difference right there.
travel crazy.
I was talking about how like Mandela effects are the effects of time travel, that
So
they're only really happening recently is because this is around the time that time travel became possible. And we've been affecting time viciously from the early 2000s or maybe before that.
I have a different theory, but I like that theory. But I thought of this idea too while I was reading all this. What if the Mandela effect has always been happening and we haven't fully recorded it? So I'm wondering if maybe that the Mandela effect is an old phenomenon, and just maybe they interpret it as something else. I don't know.
Well, I just think that like we have terms for things, you know what I mean? Like we only just recently gave this thing a term. Like, and it's just,
Well,
and
deja
all it
vu
took
could
was
also be related
the
to
only
it
thing that
too.
all it took was just like one example of the thing. And us being like, yeah, that's weird. And then it happened again, like, oh yeah, it's just like that other thing. We keep referencing back to the other thing. But it's such a recent thing that happened. It's like, why didn't we do this over the course of
Yeah.
thousands of years?
See, I
It's just a term. Like, why? It's like we have. I looked it up, and deja vu was only coined in 1876. But like, I mean, I can't tell if that helps the idea of it just only being realized recently, or the other. I don't know, because that is actually pretty recently. But I don't know. I guess what I think also, if it did always happen, I would actually think it's pretty believable that people in the past be like, yeah, I'm stupid. Yeah, I'm stupid. I guess I just didn't realize that it wasn't that. Like, nobody thought it was a crazy thing happening, right? Because they're all just like, what do I know?
Mhm. Yeah, I don't see any like 1800s Mandela effect or anything when I'm looking it up.
Well,
But
1800s was when deja vu was coined, which I think is a
oh, I know, but I'm trying to just find pre 1900s Mandela effect like examples.
yeah. Look up, just look at Mandela effects before the 2000s, or maybe before the 90s.
So this is what I was saying: limited documentation. The 1800s saw a vast amount of historical events and figures, and documentation may not be as comprehensive or readily accessible as for later periods. This could leave room for misinterpretations or shared or incorrect memories. So here's another thing: is the people that remember this shit could also have died a long time ago. And I think people have been like saying shit that they think they remember for a long time, like oh, telling a story like incorrectly or something like that. You know what I mean? So the vast majority of the pre-internet Mandela effect are from the 70s and early 80s. Tons. When I was a kid, magazines would have lists like famous lines they never said in the movie. And it was universally understood to be a quirk of memory caused by popular misquotes being heard more times than you actually watched the film. It's only very recently that people have been
Nothing
framing
you
it as
found,
a
nothing.
supernatural thing. What if the Mandela effect is literally just all these people, like, just even if they're not doing anything in time, just by stepping on a bug or inconveniencing one random dude or something, they change the whole process of, like, time, and they cause, like, the butterfly effect. They cause, like, a ripple effect that changes or alters, like, a slight
Yeah,
thing
the
in the
butterfly effect.
timeline.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, what if the Mandela effect is caused by the butterfly effect with time travelers? What if, like, because they keep hopping around in different time, like, different, like, altering the time just very, very slightly, they're causing all these slight changes in the timeline.
Yeah.
People are always trying to fuck with the timeline.
Where do you think ghosts
Yeah.
and aliens kind of
What?
correlate with time travel?
Did you say ghosts?
Yeah.
Well, all right, so I've actually thought of this before with ghosts. So, I've had this idea where some ghosts I think might be like a spiritual imprint of a memory from that ghost onto, like, the area, like their energy basically imprinted on the area.
Yeah, that's what I used to think they were. It still could be. I don't know.
My idea, well, the reason why I'm thinking this is just to relate it to time travel. So if that's the case, what I could see is that this energy is outside of our dimension, which it obviously is regardless, but it could touch outside of time and space, and this energy could, say, theoretically go back in time or forward in time. So a spot could be haunted in the timeline indefinitely, forever, as long as whatever the thing that's imprinted on is there, so to speak, or whatever that ghost memories imprinted in is still there. Like if it's a sidewalk,
Could it be that the consciousness is quantumly entangled to that place, or is it something?
that's exactly. And it basically goes outside of time and space. So if you were to go back, like, say 200 years or so, that spot would still be haunted with that ghost, if it's like a piece of pavement that's there. Or if you go forward 200 years, that
And that
spot would
actually
still
kind of
be
also worked
haunted
with
with that ghost.
that kind of sounds like I see now how this connects to how you were saying that, like the time machine, that you can only travel forward and back in time, starting from when the that's how I'm connecting to what you're saying before. Because think about it, like say you die in some car, and now you're haunting that car, but then you never appear before the time that you died in that car, but you could appear in time any moment in time after that. So I think about like time travel. Think about like
Yeah.
time travel. You can never
Well,
go
I'm
before the
also,
moment that the time travel started. Then you'd be disconnected.
well, so what I'm kind of what I'm also kind of saying, though, is that I think that ghosts could haunt a spot before theoretically
Really?
it lived, even. Like that ghost could be, yes. That's kind of also what I was saying, is that I think potentially this energy, if it is outside of our dimension and it's outside of time, I think if as long as that object is there in that space, it'll haunt that object. So I'm thinking that a ghost will go outside of time. That's it. That's if a ghost is what I'm saying it is, and it's a spiritual or a memory impression on a thing. That's also I'm also just saying I guess one aspect of that part that it could be. It might not be that. It might be like you're saying where the ghost can only like go forward in time. But I'd like to think a ghost could haunt potentially just an area, and it could go backwards, it could go forwards. I think that's also why certain areas could potentially harbor like dark, like what's the word? Like a dark energy, because that dark energy's always been there and will always be there. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess. Like there'll always be trouble in Bermuda Triangle because there always was trouble in the Bermuda Triangle because it's almost like a loop. Like I think the supernatural like ghosts and like shit like that, not like aliens, but like beings that are outside of our like mortal plane. I think those things don't react to the laws of time and obviously space. I think that they work outside of time and space. But you know what, that the idea of ghosts haunting a like a lake or something after, you know, and never like getting like ghost sightings or hauntings before like that person died, that kind of defeats my what I'm saying too. So I could all be wrong about like that part of it. And I probably am. But ghosts. I don't know. I do think though that like areas harbor like darker energy and that things do kind of latch on to like areas. But I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I when it comes to ghosts, I also have to think about like other entities. You know what I mean? Like it's really hard.
Well, you don't necessarily have to. Just think about ghosts as they are. Think about it as if there's only ghosts. The idea that there's only like an imprint of a person or an energy, an imprint of an energy on something. That's all you got to think about. Not demons, not angels, not
You first began explaining it. You said the imprint of the energy and like the memory. That's how I used to believe it. For well, I didn't even start believing in ghosts until only like a few years ago. I would think about how ghosts could be possible when I that anything. It's imprint of the moment. Say somebody was murdered, right? Having mental energy, or good or bad. That
yeah, like they're screaming or something like that, and you hear random
and it
screams
wouldn't
at
be that
night or
like
something.
yeah, and it wouldn't be like that person. It would just be that like you're seeing an imprint of that person. Like you ever play Dark Souls
Yeah.
or like any other game where you see like the ghost of somebody who was there, and like they'll say something, but like all they'll say is like something having to do with them.
I mean, I'm at a total loss for ghosts. I think if anything, I believe what you used to believe because I don't think that at this point I could fathom anything else. I'm still getting used to the idea that Mars might have colonies of aliens on it that we don't even know that live underground. This guy, oh, one other thing I want to tell you that Basiago said. He said that Mars has a colony underground and that it contains 1 million people. I think he meant aliens also.
Well, these are people.
I think he said humanoids was his exact
Oh,
wording, but I could be
yeah.
mistaken on that. But I don't know. That was what did I not get into on here? Hold on. All
I
right.
kind of pulled us away from the topic you were talking about to go back to time travel.
I know. But I know where we were. So I actually wrote in here, could this be the cause of the Mandela effect? Question mark. I love how I always say the question mark. Bob Lazar said mankind had been genetically altered 65 times, going back to what I said to you at the beginning of the pod.
Yeah.
They referred to humans as containers. This is a quote that Bob Lazar said. They referred to humans as containers, but Lear told Corbell that aliens see us like a wine and our bodies as containers, and our souls are like. Sorry, I fucked that up.
That's
Aliens,
scary to describe it to
alien,
something.
yeah. Lear told Corbell that aliens see us like a wine, and our bodies are containers, and our souls are like wine to them. Well, that was the exact quote. Yeah. The problem is that not only are just the fact that there are 5 to 10 civilizations visiting us at any given time, is that 90% of them are hostile and operate on a completely different set of morals than us, is what John Lear said in that same interview, if I'm not mistaken. They said that the Mars and Moon have colonies. And last little bit of information that I wanted to mention, there was a guy named Phil Corso. Not last little bit. I've got a few little facts here that I wanted to mention. There's a guy named Phil Corso who apparently was present at the Roswell crash. He was on Art Bell's show and basically talked about the Roswell crash and what they got out of it. He died 1 year later of a heart attack and said that these crafts led to the development of accelerated particle beam devices, fiber optics, lasers, integrated circuit chips, and Kevlar material. A lot of the reverse engineering tech for the Aurora program was from all this. Specifically the TR-3B. It's what people considered the black triangles. Some people think that JFK found out about how the Cold War was actually not a real war, according to some conspiracy theorists. Some conspiracy theorists allegedly think that JFK was assassinated because he was going to reveal the truth that the reason why we were doing an arms race with the Soviets is because we had a secret joint Russian U.S. space program where we were building these spacecrafts together and reverse engineering aliens that we were in contact with because we both received Nazi scientists from Operation Paperclip that led to studying these gray aliens closer. There was a famous man, Edgar Mitchell, my favorite astronaut. He said, "I do believe a lot more is known." And I should also preface all this by saying this was said in 1991 on the 22nd anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. This was the 22nd anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. And it was Buzz Aldrin was there, Edgar Mitchell, and a few other guys. What the hell was his name? I think James Irwin is his name. And one or two other guys. All, if I'm not mistaken, men who supposedly walked on the moon. Now, one thing is that Oprah asked Edgar Mitchell if, or he asked everybody really, if they believe in alien life more now than before they went up into space, if that was a part of their experience. I do believe a lot more is known about ETs. I believe a lot more is known about ET investigation than is publicly available right now and has been for a long time. And Oprah said back, "And why do you think it's being kept from the public?" And Mitchell said, "Oh hell, it goes back to World War II when all of that happened." So what do you think he was talking about there with World War II?
I'm pretty sure I know what he's talking about.
Yeah. But Buzz Aldrin's next response,
What do you think he's talking about?
I don't know. I think it goes back to the Manhattan Project, partially. But what's up?
So, you know the whistleblowers that are coming about right now,
Which ones?
the ones that are talking about UFOs,
I know, but like,
the ones that are part of the military. There's multiple UFO. There's like I think there's like 4 now or 5 of them now.
are you talking about Louis Elizondo? Like,
He's one of them.
are you talking about something that happened today or yesterday?
No. Just like you know how like the last year or so,
Yeah, no, I know.
like the guys who dropped the egg video and everything. One of the guys, I'm talking about these guys. You know exactly what I'm talking. One of those guys, I forgot which one it was. I forgot his name actually. I can picture him. He often talks about how this is all tied to when they were developing the nuclear bomb, and how all of the levels of secrecy that are like now embedded in our government, all of that started because of the experiments going on with the atom bomb. And he says it's like deeper than that. Like that's just like really good, realistic explanation that makes total sense. He's saying that's what it is. But he's saying that there's also like other kinds of experiments that they were doing that was like a blanket thing that they enacted. So now they're like, yeah, we don't need to tell anybody anything about what we're doing. And it started then, apparently.
I don't know.
So like Oppenheimer was involved in that.
I don't know if it started then because Jack Parsons was before that, wasn't he?
Jack Parsons was just the guy who was like helping us develop rockets, right? We're talking about the government literally being the government, essentially like a shadow government being formed based around technology.
Yeah, but he created a secret society though, that basically was trying to like get into like extra dimensional like entities or something like that.
That's different. So he was part of I forgot what the name of that secret school was.
The Thule or the Thune or something like that.
The Thule Society. Yeah, that's different. I'm talking about like you know you often talk about the deep state. We're talking
Yeah.
the deep state. People who have UFO technology and don't want to reveal it.
Yeah, but they have had people like I mean, haven't they had like people that were like kind of like Men in Black types like going back. They had the Pinkertons back in the day. I mean, I know they were like an independent agency.
Yes, but they also had public facing investigations into these things. And honestly, like think about when World War II happened. That was the 40s. How many UFO related incidents do you know of before the 40s? How many Men in Black stories do you have existing before the 40s? All I'm saying is that their blanket of control really took its foothold because of the development of the nuclear bomb. And like our government was like, yes, make this bomb no matter what, whatever it takes, do whatever it takes. You can have all the resources in the world. Nobody has to ask you a fucking question.
Yeah, true, but there were a lot of UFO reports before all this stuff, the nuclear bomb and all that. Like
I'm
there
not
were
saying I'm not saying UFO reports didn't happen. I'm talking about the
because
way
look
they
at like
suppressed
Christopher Columbus seeing like the UFOs come out of the Atlantic
it.
Ocean.
I never said UFOs didn't exist.
Dude, why are you saying UFOs don't exist?
I'm saying that the level of control over the conversation and the suppression of UFO and alien technology and the idea of aliens was suppressed heavily starting in around World War II, because that's when they literally like wrote into law, or maybe it was even just like status quo. They're like, this is how we're doing it from now on. And it's been like that ever since. That's when they started doing it because they were allowed to, because they were given the keys to the kingdom, so we could just win a war.
Maybe.
But I'm not even saying that I believe that. I'm just trying to explain to you what
But
one of the whistleblowers is trying to explain.
maybe they had some knowledge of something, otherworldly, and that was why the United States decided to start compartmentalizing their information like that, because they got that knowledge too. When all those scientists defected over here. I'm not even just talking about Operation.
That's what he's saying. What he's saying is that,
I'm
like,
not even just talking about Operation Paperclip. I'm talking about pre-Paperclip, when just like Einsteins were just coming over here, like trying to escape Nazi Germany.
around the time that we're developing the bomb. Yeah,
Yeah,
the guy, he believes that it was all based around alien tech. He believes that's what it was all about.
that makes sense.
I just think that regardless of alien tech, it totally makes sense how the development of the nuclear bomb in America made it so that they can keep secrets from us way more than they ever have been able to.
Well, yeah, because it became a concern of national security.
And when I started explaining it, the way it described how they allowed these guys to operate, you know what it reminded me of?
What?
Have you read or watched the new show, The Three Body Problem?
No.
All right. Spoilers for this book series and TV show. I've only watched the TV show. Clearly. At the very end of the show, they come up with this like new thing. Or maybe they had this in the works for a while and it's finally time to enact this plan. Their plan is to find like the most innovative minds, or like the best, who they believe are the best chances for humanity's survival across the world, and they give them all the resources in the world. And pretty much these people, I forgot what they were called. It was a really cool fucking name and a really cool concept when I heard it. Give them all the resources in the world. Like, you could walk up to Area 51 and they'll just see who you are and they'll just let you in. They don't even have to ask you a thing.
That would be pretty cool.
Right? And it goes beyond that. You can go over borders. You could just walk over the Mexican border. You could walk into Russia. You could walk into Putin's office and be like, I need to talk to you. And he's going to make time to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it is, though, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And
That's the concept for this TV show.
well, that's just what happens at the very end. They create this idea, or they announce this idea to combat aliens. They're doing this because they need these people to come up with a way to help humanity survive while this alien species is warning us, saying, "Hey, we're coming to take you over," and they're not being nice about it at all. I
Well,
highly recommend you watch that show, dude. It's crazy you
what was
haven't
it
yet.
again?
The Three Body Problem.
Three Bobby Problem. All right. Yeah, I'll check it out.
It's made by the guys who did Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say it's a big redemption because it's really
It's a
good.
big redemption. You're like, I'll be the one to say it.
Dude, one of this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. Many of the scenes are some of the craziest things I've ever seen. But they just pull it off so well. It's a visual spectacle. I guess spectacle includes the word vision in it, right? Spec.
Basiago thing I got from this book, and it talked about time travelers, and it talked about Basiago, and it also talked about John Teeter. We could choose like random things from this book and just read them off. Phantom ships and ghostly crews. Oh, did you ever hear the story of the Mary Celeste?
I've heard of it, but tell it to me.
The Amazon was cursed from the beginning. During her maiden voyage, the Amazon's captain died. After being salvaged by an American company that renamed her the Mary Celeste, the ship left New York on November 7th, 1872, bound for Genoa, Italy. On board were Captain Benjamin Briggs, his family, and a crew of 7. Nearly a month later, on December 4th, the crew of another ship, the De Gracia, found the ship abandoned. There was plenty of food and water on board the Mary Celeste, but the only living soul on the ship was a cat. And the crew and the captain's family were missing, and no clues remained as to where they went. The last entry in the captain's logbook was dated almost 2 weeks prior to the ship's discovery, meaning it had somehow piloted itself all that time. To this day, the fate of the members of the Mary Celeste remains unknown, as does how the ship piloted its way across the ocean, non-crewed for weeks. Many believe it was piloted by a ghostly crew that kept it safe until it was found. That's crazy.
That's cool.
Alright, what else we got? Another ghostly ship, the Iron Mountain. A ship disappearing on the high seas is one thing, but on a river, that's exactly what happened to the Iron Mountain in June 1872. The 180-foot long ship left New Orleans heading for Pittsburgh via the Mississippi River with a crew of more than 50 men. A day after picking up additional cargo, which was towed behind the ship in barges, the Iron Mountain steamed its way north and promptly vanished. Later that day, the barges were recovered floating in the river. The Iron Mountain and its entire crew were never seen nor heard from again. For years after it disappeared, the ship's captains would whisper to each other about how the Iron Mountain was simply sucked up into another dimension through a ghostly portal.
I like the ideas of this stuff. I told you before, one of the more fascinating things I've ever read was about the Super Argosio Sea or something like that, or Super Argasso Sea. Or maybe it was the Hyper Argasso Sea, I forgot. Because there's like an actual thing called that. But then this guy was like, well, what if there's like a thing like that, but up in the sky? And it was like an area way, way up in Earth where things appear and drop down from the sky. And this guy was like cataloging and like going through all incidents where things just mysteriously fell from the sky and there's no explanation how it happened.
There's isn't that's like in Thor Ragnarok, Sakaar. There's actually a word for that type of like a world that has portals that just drop trash from just random places. There's actually like a legit like scientific term for that.
Isn't that interesting?
I forgot what it was.
So this guy, I believe that happens, and then like something causes things to disappear on the Earth's surface and reappear up way high up in the air. It explains things disappearing and falling from the sky.
Hey, what do you think of anachronistic objects?
This one I'm talking about too is like I like the idea of things just disappearing and appearing somewhere they shouldn't. It's like Lost. You know, when you were describing that story of them on the ship, I was like, imagine they all just fell asleep and woke up one day and they were like on a beach.
How do people swallow swords? Have you ever wanted to know that?
I figured that they just practice using their muscles to feed their esophagus.
And you specifically have to train by putting small swords in your mouth and gaping out your like esophagus and like basically like widening it until you're able to like fit a really long sword down into your esophagus. And then a lot of people have died doing this too, if you can imagine that.
Yeah.
Some swallowers coat their swords with a lubricant such as olive oil. Those cheating bastards. Bill Veeck was the most colorful team owner in the history of baseball. Was he just a goofball animal, or was he a genius ahead of his time? I already like the sound of that guy. Let's stick to the conspiracy. Monster on the Chesapeake. Scotland has the famous Loch Ness Monster, but Nessie isn't the only sea monster lurking in the deeps. People who live in America's East Coast may be surprised to know that there's reportedly one close to home, Chesapeake Bay. Oh, this is interesting. Did you ever really hear much about this? Hmm. We got Sasquatch. Nah, you're cool.
So I knew there was other nested cryptids in America, but
Mm-hmm.
when I was a kid, I was a huge fan of Loch Ness Monster, and I looked at every other one as just like an imitation and not important.
So, well, this one's interesting because, well, the first thing I saw, Chesapeake Bay is a 200-mile intrusion of the Atlantic Ocean into Virginia and Maryland. If this is an intrusion of the Atlantic Ocean into this thing, then that would make sense if a giant fucking like sea monster thing, like ancient thing, got like trapped here and just like survived.
Listen, I think it's totally possible that a dinosaur could have survived. Do we have any idea what the lifespan of a dinosaur could be?
I have no idea. I would imagine they're like a chicken's.
Do you think Loch Ness Monster is like a chicken?
No, honestly, if anything, they're probably more like an alligator or a shark. You know what I mean? They probably like have a lifespan of an alligator, whatever that is. It says here that the mouth is 12 miles wide, allowing plenty of room for strange saltwater creatures up and down the eastern seaboard. Up and down the eastern seaboard were reported during the 1800s, but sightings of Chessie, a huge snake-like creature with a football-shaped head and flippers, began to escalate in the 60s. Former CIA employee Donald Kiker, some neighbors saw not one but four unidentified water creatures swimming near shore in 1978. Then in 1980, the creature was spotted just off Love Point, sparking in media frenzy. 2 years later, Maryland resident Robert Frew was entertaining dinner guests with his wife Karen when the whole party noticed a giant water creature about 200 yards from shore, swimming toward a group of people frolicking nearby in the surf. They watched the creep. They watched the creature, which they estimated to be about 30 feet in length, as it dove underneath the unsuspecting humans, emerged on the other side, and swam away. Frew recorded several minutes of the creature's antics, and the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History reviewed his film. Although they could not identify the animal, they did concede that it was animate or living. I mean, I think a lot of these creatures that people think are like sea serpents are probably sturgeons. I don't know if there's any saltwater sturgeons in this area, but that would make sense, you know what I mean? All right. So here's one thing that we didn't talk about that happened in 1952. There was over Washington D.C. There was a bunch of UFOs that supposedly showed up. And there's a lot of different theories about what exactly that was. Some people think it was retaliation from the Nazis because of Operation High Jump. True story. But a lot of people think it was the Greys that were asserting their dominance over the the White House at the time. But here is a story from 1952 that seems pretty interesting. What happened on the night of September 12th, 1952? Was it a meteor or a UFO, a robot or an alien monster, a hoax or the simple truth? Read the account and decide for yourself. While playing football in the afternoon of September 12th, 1952, a group of boys in Flatwoods, West Virginia saw a large fireball fly over their heads. The object seemed to stop near the hillside property of Bailey Fisher. Some thought the object was a UFO, but others said it was just a meteor. They decided to investigate. Darkness was falling as the boys made their way toward the hill, so they stopped at the home of Kathleen May to borrow a flashlight. Seeing how excited the boys were, May, her two sons, and their friend Eugene Lemon decided to join them. the group set off to find exactly what had landed on the hill. As they neared the top of the hill, the group smelled a strange odor that reminded them of burning metal. Continuing on, some members of the group thought they saw an object that resembled a spaceship, shining their flashlights in front of them. The group was startled when something not of this world moved out from behind a nearby tree. The description of what is now known as the Flatwoods Monster is almost beyond belief. It stood around 12 feet tall and had a round reddish face from which two large holes were visible. The creature, which appeared to be made out of a dark metal, had no arms or legs and seemed to float through the air. Looking back, the witnesses believed that they saw was a protective suit or perhaps a robot rather than a monster. When a flashlight beam hit the creatures, its eyes lit up and it began floating toward the group while making a strange hissing noise. The horrible stench was now overpowering, and some in the group immediately felt nauseous. Because she was at the head of the group, Kathleen May had the best view of the monster. He later stated that as the creature was moving toward her, it squirted or dripped a strange fluid on her that resembled oil but had an unusual odor to it. Terrified beyond belief, the group fled down the hillside and back to the May house, where they telephoned Sheriff Robert Carr, who responded with his deputy, Burnell Long. After talking with the group, they gathered some men and went to the Fisher property to investigate, but they only found a gummy residue and what appeared to be skid marks on the ground. There was no monster and no spaceship. However, the group did report that the heavy stench of what smelled like burning metal was still in the air. A. Lee Stewart, a member of the search party and co-publisher of the Braxton Democrat, knew a good story when he saw one. So he sent the tale over to the Newswire, and almost immediately people were asking Kathleen May for interviews. On September 19th, 1952, May and Stewart discussed the Flatwoods Monster on the TV show We the People. For the show, an artist sketched the creature based on May's description, but he took some liberties. The resulting sketch was so outrageous that people started saying the whole thing must be nothing more than a hoax. Slowly, though, others came forward to admit that they too had seen a strange craft flying through the sky near Flatwoods on September 12th. One witness described it as roughly the size of a single-car garage. He said that he lost sight of the craft when it appeared to land on a nearby hill. Since that night in 1952, the Flatwoods Monster has never been seen again, leaving many people to wonder what exactly those people encountered. A monster, an alien from another world, or perhaps nothing more than a giant owl. One thing is for sure, there were far too many witnesses to deny that they stumbled upon something strange that night. What do you think the Flatwoods Monster was?
You know how we were talking, how many species of aliens?
Yeah.
That's a good example of a whole bunch of random stuff.
See,
That totally fit the 37th species or something.
that to me sounded like a probe. That sounded like an alien probe or a drone more than an actual like a creature. Like that guy was saying that it sounded like a robot. The guy said it looked more like a robot in hindsight. So maybe it was just that. It was like a drone that they sent here for like reconnaissance or like intelligence or something like that.
I mean, just because it sounded like a robot doesn't mean. Like, have you ever heard of anything like it before? Have you like? It's kind of random for it to just look like that. So weird. And then to just write off, like, it was just a drone of one of the other aliens.
Well, yeah, I mean that's still a weird situation, but you know what I
Like, even
mean?
if it is a drone, it's like, what was the
Yeah.
drone for? Like, what the fuck was, like, that's not a gray alien thing. That's not a Nord thing.
Well,
Right?
that's not a thing that we know about. It could be. It could. You know what that could be? That could be an Anunnaki thing. That could be from the Anunnaki homeworld, kind of keeping an eye on everybody. You know what I'm saying? Like how the GG are like their slaves. The Anunnaki could have probes that they're just sending around here that are just checking shit out.
Now, how does this fit into the simulation?
What, like the like aliens stealing your soul and all that?
but like, if it's all simulation, what are these things?
They're just entities that are also in the simulation. If this is all this is all a simulation, then what is this? What are you?
I don't know. I guess I just mean to assume that the things that we're talking about are like outside of our level of reality or something.
But it's not. It's all like kind of coming and bubbling to the surface. I mean, that's what I get out of it. So this is pretty interesting. This guy is named John William Dune. He questioned much in life, but nothing more keenly than human dreams and their meanings. His obsession with the Twilight world was sparked by an odd event that he couldn't explain. How had Dune been able to see one of the world's greatest tragedies while he was asleep? And how could this have occurred before the event took place? This is like what I was telling you that I see. I see like photographic moments when I dream that eventually become a reality of something that I see in real life. But I wanna see if that's exactly what this guy's like knocking on. John William Dune is best known for the invention of the first practical and stable tailless airplane. But in addition to his aeronautic accomplishments, Dune offered compelling theories about the very structure of time in his book, An Experiment with Time. Dune's interest in this area was prompted by his uncanny knack for forecasting events through his dreams. Of these, one proved particularly mind-boggling. On the chance that there might be something to his nocturnal visions, Dune recorded each dream in writing. In early May 1902, while working as an engineer for the British military in South Africa, Dune had a dream in which he found himself on the island of Martinique. In his vision, the French territory exploded and some 30,000 people perished as a result. Waking up in a cold sweat, Dune weighed his options. Should he warn the French authorities, or would his amazing claim fall upon deaf ears? Dune chose to alert the powers that be, but he was unable to persuade what he later called the incredulous French authorities to evacuate the island. A few days after he had his vision, Dune received a newspaper at his outpost. To his absolute horror, he discovered that his chilling dream had become a reality. Mount Pelée, located on the island of Martinique, had erupted with unbelievable force. In its wake, around 30,000 people had died. Had Dune foreseen the future, or are the past, present, and future simply elusive human perceptions? The question would preoccupy Dune for the rest of his waking days and many of his sleep-filled nights, too. 5 ways to get rid of a ghost. When there's something strange, dun, dun, in the neighborhood, dun, dun, who you gonna call? Dun, dun. You're gonna read the 5 strange ways to get rid of a ghost.